Preacher, Volume 7, Salvation, written by Garth, Ennis, art by Steve Dillon. Alright, Volume 7, a maybe controversial volume, a volume that not all of you will like, maybe. Some of you might be annoyed with because this volume does not really progress the overall story that much. It is in some ways maybe a filler divergence volume, however, do not skip it. Do not skip this volume because it is very compelling. So the premise of this volume is that Jesse is going to become a sheriff in a small Texas town, and he's gonna run out the bad guy in town named Odin Quincannon. And it is an 8-issue arc on this. So, partly I was maybe a little bit annoyed because I want to progress the overall story and learn more about Hair Star and Cassidy and Tulip and Jesse's overall adventure. However, I love this volume. It is so good. It is one of my favorite volumes of Preacher. It is so compelling. It is just this standalone tale. Jesse becoming this sheriff in this small town. We got a whole new cast of characters. We got this pretty good bad guy, Odin Quincannon, and it is a modern day Western, and it would make a fabulous movie if you changed some of the plot details so it didn't tie in with Preacher. But yeah, great volume. I love it, man. It is so good. So I want to set your expectations up front because I don't want some of you going like, this is going on a while. When are we going to progress things? Because we're not going to progress the things that much, but we're going to enjoy this standalone tale, and it is very entertaining and very good. So, yeah. Enjoy Volume 7, Salvation. Issue 41, Salvation Part 1, The Man from God Knows Where. Last volume, Jesse saw Cassidy and Tulip together, and it shook him. Jesse felt he needed a break. He needed some time to figure out what he was going to do with his life, and what he was going to do about his quest. With his new dog companion, Skeeter, Jesse, he drove back into Texas, his old home. He drove through a small, half-dilapidated town called Salvation, Texas, population 1,628. Jesse, he pulls into a small diner called Jody's Bar and Grill. In the bar, one of the locals makes fun of Jesse having an eye patch. He says, "What is Jesse, a pirate?" He's calling him Captain Blackbeard. Jesse grabs the guy's head and almost smashes it onto the bar counter, but he stops himself right before the man's face would be smashed in, and Jesse tells the man, "That could have been your face, but today's Christmas." Jesse leaves the bar, doesn't injure the man. As Jesse is heading back to his car, ready to leave this town, he notices a group of men harassing a young girl with one eye. Jesse recognizes that girl as Lori Bobbs, the sister/fiancée of his old childhood friend Billy Bob Bobbs, whom we met back in Volume 2 of Preacher. Jesse, he beats up the men harassing Lori, and they all line up and apologize to her. Jesse, he then says hello to Lori, and the two of them recognize each other and get to talking. As Jesse and Lori are talking, the two cops in this small town were watching this whole confrontation go down. The sheriff of this small town is named Sheriff Jim Bewley. He is the sheriff of this backwater town. He is a fair man and treats people well, but he is a yes man. He is in the pocket of the rich businessman Odin Quincannon, who pays him to look the other way on most things him and his people get up to in this town. So that is often what Sheriff Bewley does. He looks the other way. His deputy is named Cindy Daggett. She is a idealistic young black woman, and although she is a deputy, Jim treats her more as his personal secretary. Cindy says, "Shouldn't we do something? That man," referring to Jesse, "beat the hell out of those people right in the street." And Jim comments, "Leave it. He doesn't want to get involved." Jesse walks this Lori Bobbs back to her home, and Lori says that she knows that her dad was upset with Jesse and his family over the death of her brother Billy Bob Bobbs, but she knows that Jesse is a good man and never would have done anything to hurt her brother. Lori introduces Jesse to the woman that she lives with. This woman's name is Jody. She owns the local diner in town that Jesse ate at earlier called Jody's Bar and Grill. Jody, she is missing her one arm, and she has a scar on the left side of her face starting beside her eye. Jesse and Jody talk. Jody says that she lost her arm in the swamps by gators. Jody says that Lori, she has some sort of syndrome. Her brain sometimes sends the wrong information about what she's seeing. As Lori walks back in the room, Jesse to her looks like a big bag of fertilizer, and Jody looks like a bird. Lori, she offers Jesse to stay the night at their place in town. Jesse, he lies in bed that night, and he remembers the war in the desert with Star's people, and the image of Tulip and Cassidy together. And the hole in Jesse's memory is driving him crazy. He can't remember what happened to his eye, or anything after he fell out of that plane. Jesse decides that he needs to shift down a gear for a bit, and he thinks that the town of Salvation might be a good place to stay for a while. Next day, down at Jody's Bar and Grill, we see the locals in the bar. Now this is a hick town, full of racists and losers, but it has a certain peace to it. Jesse sees some of the white locals making fun of the one Mexican guy in town, Hector. Jody explains, they rag on him from time to time, just to remind him of his place. And he smiles at their jokes, but he gets to hang out with them. Hector's a little slow, he doesn't know too many people, and those assholes are pretty good to him most of the time. Hell, sometimes it's even his turn to go home with Cora for the night. Jesse comments sarcastically, "Lucky dog." Jody explains how their town works. There is definitely a history of racism. The colored folks live on the west side of town, a place called John's Hollow. Jody says that she's not racist herself though. She prefers to judge people by what's inside of them, not how they look. And she jokes, "My halo's in the mail in case you were wondering." Jesse asks, what about the people that caused trouble with Lori earlier? Jody explains that those troublemakers in town, they work for this guy, Odin Quincannon. They're not local. They work at Quincannon's meatpacking plant down the road. They come into town and they give people shit. Jesse comments, "Goddamn worthless trash, picking on the girl like that? I should have stuck around and wailed on him some more." Jody says, I declare, just can't stand seeing a woman in pain, And Jesse replies, "Little weakness of mine. What was that thing you were saying about halos?" Jody continues saying, "Look, you can't change things. You can watch over them, maybe stop them from getting worse, but nobody's trying to save the world, stranger. Nobody's dumb enough." Later on that night, Jesse is visited by Sheriff Jim Bewley. The sheriff was impressed with Jesse's handling of those men earlier, and he wants to offer Jesse a job as his deputy. Maybe help keep the peace in town? He asks Jesse, "Are you interested in being my deputy?" And Jesse replies, "No. But I'll be your goddamn sheriff." Issue 42, The Meatman Cometh. We see this Quincannon meatpacking plant we've heard so much about. We see plenty of cows being herded in for the slaughter. We see waste from the meatpacking plant being fed directly into a nearby stream. We see cows being sawed in half, blood just spraying everywhere. We see Odin Quincannon making noises from one room in this meat plant, his private meat shed. He's saying, "Now, say the name, say the name." He then leaves satisfied and says morning to his guards, and they were making sure nobody disturbed him. We finally see Odin Quincannon in his boxers, covered in blood from all the meat. What was he doing in that meat shed? We'll find out later. Odin Quincannon is a perverted, vile businessman who runs a cattle slaughterhouse inside the town of Salvation, Texas. He is fantastically rich. His wealth was enough to buy off the town's sheriff, Sheriff Jim Bewley, to buy off judges in the county, and to pay for any kind of illegal activity he needs doing. Not only all that, he was an owl-eyed, tiny little goblin man who talked about himself in the third person and saw himself as a supreme ruler of sorts. Jim Bewley, the previous town sheriff, he thought about Jesse's offer, and he decided that he wanted out. If Jesse wanted his job, what the hell? He handed over his sheriff's badge to Jesse and made him sheriff. Jesse asks, "Isn't there supposed to be an election or something?" And Jim responds, "They'll get around to it eventually. They did with me." Folks around here ain't too concerned with the niceties, long as you do the job right. He tells Jesse that Cindy will be his deputy, and she'll fill him in on all the details. He then says, "I reckon you'll be just fine, Sheriff. Bye now." And he heads in his car, driving away. Jesse, he puts on his sheriff's badge and has a satisfied grin on his face. Jody sees Jesse wearing this sheriff's badge and she says, "My oh my, it didn't take you long, did it? Tradition demands you start cleaning this place up and run the bad guys out of town on a rail. Then you gotta fall in love with the town beauty and acquire a drunken but amusing sidekick." "How about it, stranger?" Jesse responds, "That's Sheriff Stranger to you. See you later, Jody." Jesse says hello to Cindy, his new deputy. She doesn't seem too happy to see him. Jesse says he was hoping that she might drive him around a bit, show him the area, introduce him to folks. Cindy says maybe tomorrow. She has all this paperwork to do. Jesse asks her, "Don't you have a secretary to do that?" And Cindy replies, "No, we've got me, apparently." Well, Jesse tells her, "That's no good. You're a law officer. You ain't got time for this bullshit. Hire a secretary, take it out of my salary." Cindy is surprised. Jesse quickly earned her respect, and she sees that Jesse's gonna be different than Jim was. Cindy opens up a map and starts showing Jesse their jurisdiction. And Odin Quincannon himself comes down to visit the new sheriff, and he just waltzes right into their office. Odin wants to talk to Jesse and lay down how things are gonna be. Jesse makes fun of Odin's small stature and says, "Oh, do you need a cushion?" as Odin's head is barely rising above the stacks of paper on the table. Odin explains that he runs a business a couple miles out of town. Quincannon Meats, pretty much everyone knows it. A lot of folks around here call him the Meatman. Odin, he says he brought a lot of dollars into this here county, lots of jobs too, and he feels that accords him a certain level of respect due him. He says his men are regular patrons of salvation services. They got plenty of money to spend, and local law enforcement has to bear that in mind when dealing with any trouble they might cause. Odin, he also wants Jesse to look the other way on the various environmental and health and safety regulations regarding his business that he might be violating. Odin expects Jesse to do his job nice and quiet and leave him alone. Odin then says, speaking in the third person, "And you'll soon see that Odin Quincannon's generosity knows no bounds." Are we clear? Jesse grabs Odin and tosses him through the window. Jesse then walks outside of his sheriff office building, and one of Odin's bodyguards says, "Son of a bitch, he's 75 years old." Jesse says, "That's okay, I hit young folks too," and he punches that bodyguard in the face. Another bodyguard pulls a gun, and Jesse kicks him in the groin and then throws him through the car's side window, breaking the glass. A woman walks out. She introduces herself. Her name is Miss Outlash. She is Odin Quincannon's lawyer. She ensures that Odin stays out of any legal trouble. Beneath her well-dressed exterior, we will soon learn she is a tight-laced, S&M-loving Nazi Hitler apologist. Miss Outlash, she threatens Jesse, saying that he's made the biggest mistake of his short, pointless career, and Jesse tells them to scrape the old buzzard up and get him the hell out of here. He doesn't want to see Odin in this town again. And then Jesse, speaking to Miss Outlash, says, "And for a future reference, the law and salvation are for sale no more. Now get!" Later on, Jesse and Cindy are shooting, doing some target practice. Cindy is pretty good with a gun. Jesse asks her about the deal that the previous sheriff had with Quincannon, and Cindy answers, well, the previous deal was to just ignore the plant workers when they cause trouble in town, which they do plenty of, and make sure they don't have to go to court. They ain't even local, they moved down from Houston, most of them. All the old sheriff had to do was look the other way, which was good because that's all folks in Salvation ever do, really. It's just that kind of place. You ain't left by the time you're 25, you're stuck. And let yourself get stuck, you're probably the kind of person that'll look the other way if it makes life easier on you. Jesse asks Cindy why she's still in town, and Cindy says, "I wanted to leave, really, I did, but Just when I was all set to go in the army, my mama got drunk and broke her back falling off the porch. Pops is dead, my big sis Kim's married, and that sort of put me behind the 8 ball. Cindy asks Jesse if he has any previous experience in law enforcement. Jesse just says, Grand Theft Auto, never got caught. Odin Quincannon, he is upset with the old Sheriff Jim Bewley for putting Jesse in charge as the new sheriff. He says Jim Bewley, that bastard, grew himself a conscience. That's what he did. Odin, he decides to call in a hit on the old sheriff for revenge. Later on, back at Lori's house, Jesse is packing up his things. He doesn't want to burden them by staying here any longer. He's got a room in the back of his sheriff's office. He's just gonna sleep back there now. Jesse asks Lori, by the way, what's the deal with Jody? What's her story? And Lori says that she hasn't had it easy. When I met her, she just got out of a mental institution. She told me she was found in the swamps years ago, a little bit east of here. She'd lost her arm and she was raving completely crazy. All she knew was her name. She was shouting it over and over, Jody, 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 like that. It sounds like it was awful for her. She doesn't know what happened before that or much after it either. She's got all these gaps in her memory. She forgets things. I think that's why they put her in a mental institution. Outside of town, we see previous Sheriff Jim Bewley. He is pulled over by another police officer in what seems like a normal traffic stop. But this other police officer was hired by Odin Quincannon, and that cop shoots and kills Jim. That cop then phones Odin and tells him, yes sir, done sir. So Odin has wiped out Jim Bewley. Back over to Jesse. He is at Jody's Bar and Grill after closing time. He is staring at Jody intently. Jody is confused and asks, what are you looking at? Jesse then asks her, Mom? Is Jody actually Jesse's long-lost mother? Issue 43, Christina's World. Now we will learn what happened to Jesse's mother, Christina, whom Jesse thought died many years ago, and why she is going by the name Jody now. We jump back in time to the day that Jody was given the order to kill Christina. Over at the Angelville plantation, Jody walks Christina down to the end of the dock with a gun pointed to her head. Christina then turns around and kicks Jody in the nuts. As Jody falls down, he gets a shot off and it zings Christina in the side of her head, which is why she has that scar she has there today. Christina, she falls into the swamp. Jody, he fired a few shots into the swamp after her, but he assumed that she was dead. Back in the present day, Jesse and his mom hug. Christina continues her story. She tells Jesse that when Jody shot her and she fell into the swamp, she wasn't dead, but she didn't know who she was. She had amnesia. She touched the pain in her head and her fingers went in and something soft yielded, and she fell down, screaming with what felt like knives behind her eyes. She doesn't know how long she was in the swamp or how far she traveled, but the next thing she remembers is coming through and an alligator biting her left arm off. She was then discovered by 3 boys up there on a hunting trip, and one of them was an army medic, and he knew just what to do to keep her alive. They were telling her not to go to sleep, to stay conscious. They asked her her name, but Christina was out of it. She just got shot in the head after all, and her arm was bitten off. She just remembers her vague confrontation with Jody and how much she hated him, and the name Jody was the only thing on her mind. So she screamed, Jody! And they thought that was her name. After that, she didn't speak again for 10 years. They got her to a hospital and a surgeon stitched her up. The police came to ask her questions, and a shrink took a look at her too, but she was silent. So they stuck her in a mental institution, and they gave her the name Jody, because that's what they assumed her name was. Jody, the name of the bastard who wrecked her life. It took years, but eventually Christina's mind slowly put itself back together, just so she could survive and do basic things like feed and clean herself. The hospital gave her drugs to help, but she was barely able to rebuild her instincts. The rest was lost. So, as she improved enough, they eventually let her leave the mental institution. They paid for a ticket for her to go anywhere she wanted. Now, when she was in a train or bus station waiting for her transport, she saw an old familiar face that she recognized from her old life. One of the blanks in her mind got filled. She saw Lori Bobs, and she thought, I know someone like that, don't I? And her brain vaguely made her remember Lori's brother, Billy Bob's face. And another little boy as well, who was Jesse. She thought, was that little boy mine? She couldn't remember though. Her mind was like an empty space waiting to be filled in, and the filling in came slowly in bits and pieces. Who she was, the kind of person she was, that came with Lori. She didn't like how people treated this Lori Bobs because of her appearance only having one eye. So Christina felt that she had to look after this girl, and she started caring for her, and the two of them became friends, and they stayed together. Slowly, bits and pieces of Christina's memory would return. Some of the bad things along with those memories though. Memories of Angelville, but she found it easier to just look forward than back. Fill her head with new memories. It made her a person again. Eventually, Lori and Christina moved to the town of Salvation, and using Lori's inheritance money, they opened up Jody's Bar and Grill together. Eventually, Christina did remember more about Angelville and Jesse, and she would get on a train or a bus and head east to find Jesse, but she would be haunted by the memories of those people. Her mother, Jody, TC, and all of a sudden, her mind would go blank, and she'd forget all over again, and she would get off the bus in the middle of whatever godforsaken hole she ended up in, and wondered, why was she here and where was she going? And she would end up coming back to Salvation. It's just easier moving forward, like she said. Christina says that when she saw Jesse, it didn't even click who he was at first. It wasn't until Jesse called her a mom that all of her memories came flooding back. She just remembered her whole life, all those missing pieces. Christina says to Jesse, I guess I'm not what you expected, eh? And Jesse answers, last time I saw you, that son of a bitch was hauling you away to kill you. I ain't had nothing to expect my whole goddamn life. You're my mom, and you're alive, and that's all that matters to me. Christina says, oh god, that place, Angelville, with those monsters, you were what, 10 years old? Jesse says, they're gone, Mom. I went back and I killed them. I choked the life out of Jody and burned the damn house. Grandma went up with it. They are all in hell now. And Christina replies, good boy, Jesse. Good boy. Jesse and his mom discuss the painting by Andrew Wyeth called Christina's World. Jesse, he saw the painting at the MoMA Museum when he was in New York. He says he remembers his mom at home staring at that painting for hours, but he never did know why until he saw the painting in the museum that day did he figure it out. Christina says that she found that painting in a book, in a huge library in Angelville. She first saw the painting when she was 12 years old and just starting to understand that things would never change for her. And she read about the backstory behind the painting, and she thought to herself, somebody's painted my life. In the painting, the artist, Andrew Wyeth, he painted his neighbor, a young girl that developed a degenerative muscle condition, possibly polio, that left her unable to walk. The girl in the painting refused to use a wheelchair, preferring to crawl, using her arms to drag her lower body along. Christina says, the girl in the painting was so weak, and this was as far as she could go away from home, to the bottom of the field, always in view of the house. It centered her world. She couldn't escape it. It reached out and brought her back no matter what. The cover of this issue is a reference to that famous painting where we see Jesse's mom in the field in front of the Angelville farmhouse with Jody, TC, and her mom there. Jesse's mom felt like the girl in the painting. She didn't have polio, but she felt like she couldn't leave the farmhouse either, even if she wanted to. Lori Bobs comes downstairs in the morning and says hello to both of them. Christina, now remembering her life, tells Lori that her real name is not Jody, it is Christina, and Jesse is her son. Over to Odin Quincannon and his lawyer, Miss Oatlash. Miss Oatlash did some investigating and found out that Jesse supposedly died in a mysterious explosion in Anvil at a church, and he was found to be dead a week later, pulled out of a river in New York City. Quincannon says, "So Custer is officially dead, huh? And he's got no kin, no past worth talking about?" And Oatlash answers, "That's correct." Quincannon says, "Then I guess nobody's going to miss him." Quincannon is planning on killing Jesse, the source of his problems and frustrations in the town of Salvation. Back over to Jesse and his mom. They are over at Jody's Bar and Grill, and Jesse asks if she is going to change the name of the restaurant now that she remembers her past. And Christina says, "I was Jody for nearly 20 years, no point trying to deny it." An older gentleman named Gunther Hahn approaches the bar, and he shakes Jesse's hand. He appears to be a nice guy. He's friends with Christina. Even though Gunther is pushing 70, Christina reveals to Jesse that she has the hots for him. Now, Gunther, he's a German. He moved to America during World War II. Now, when Gunther leaves the bar later, Jesse asks him about his German past and coming to America, and Gunther says jokingly he actually came to America initially as a Nazi spy. He says to Jesse, "You better arrest me." Now, this was almost 50 years ago now. Gunther says goodnight to Jesse and heads on home. He certainly doesn't seem like a evil Nazi or anything, but Jesse suspects something about his past is maybe up. Issue 44, Custer's Law. Christina lets down her hair and embraces a new look and a new her with all of her newfound memories. Jesse is with his dog, Skeeter. Jesse hops into his truck and turns the key and tries to turn on the car so he can get to work, but the engine won't start. Turns the key again, nothing's happening, so he gets out of the truck and decides to try and phone Cindy and see if she can give him a ride. All of a sudden, though, his truck explodes. Someone planted a bomb in his truck. Back over to Odin Quincannon's office. He is complaining to Miss Oatlash, his lawyer, that the people he hired to place the bomb in Jesse's car failed. Jesse wasn't even in the damn truck when it went off. Miss Oatlash on the phone says, "I am a respected attorney at law. I can't discuss bombing people over the telephone." Now we see Miss Oatlash on the phone is dressed in Nazi garb. She is some sort of dominatrix whipping men she has tied up. She has a Nazi flag hanging on the wall and a photo of Hitler she salutes. So she is definitely quite the character. Miss Oatlash, she is coming down to Quincannon's office to discuss some more with him. Cindy picks up Jesse in the cruiser and they are driving. Jesse is certain it was Quincannon behind the car bombing. They drive over to Quincannon's office to confront him. Jesse marches right in there, kicks down the door, hitting one of the guards in the face with the door. Jesse asks the receptionist, "Where's Quincannon?" The employees there try not to tell Jesse anything, but Jesse uses his word power and says, "Tell me." So they immediately tell him. Jesse walks through the doors to Quincannon's office. Jesse grabs him and begins dangling him by his feet out the window. Miss Oatlash argues to Jesse that this is a violation of Odin Quincannon's rights and is totally illegal. "This is outrageous," she says. Quincannon, meanwhile, is yelling, "No, no, Mommy, Daddy, make him get off of me." Cindy, watching this all go down, thinks Jesse is going too far. She fires her gun into the air in an effort to get Jesse to stop. Jesse turns to her and asks her, "Why not?" And she answers, "Because it's against the law." Jesse tells Quincannon, "Extensive damages to one sheriff's department vehicle. Go fetch your checkbook." Quincannon writes Jesse a check for the destroyed vehicle, just happy he gets to walk away with his life. Jesse warns them No one ever took a shot at me and walked away intact before, so you best play it smart and call it quits, huh? Jesse, then talking to Miss Oatlash, says, "And you, don't try to frighten me with the law, ma'am. You ain't scary." As Jesse and Cindy leave, Miss Oatlash is incredibly turned on with Jesse's display of bravado and confidence. Down by the sheriff's office later that day, with the money that Quincannon gave them, Jesse can replace that car for the police department, and he also has plenty of leftover money as well. Cindy, she has her eyes on a fancy new gun, and she asks Jesse, "Can I get one of these?" And Jesse replies, "I don't see why not." Later that night, Jesse goes to visit that Gunther Hahn he met earlier for a friendly chat. Maybe Jesse figures an ex-Nazi spy is worth looking into, or maybe the fact that his mom has the hots for this Gunther, he just wants to make sure that he's a good guy. Gunther warmly invites Jesse into his home, and Jesse asks, "I checked with the records office in town. According to them, this house belongs to a one Mark Vanderpoel, and it has for almost 50 years. That name don't sound German to me." Gunther explains that that's a Dutch name. He stopped using it years ago, though, when he became an American citizen. He reverted back to his own name, which he's been using socially almost since he's got here. But Vanderpoel was the name on the passport that got him into San Diego in June 1943. Gunther gives an explanation of his life story, just to be sure that Jesse knows where he stood. Gunther tells Jesse about how his brother, Werner, was his idol in all things. Werner had joined the German Air Force and eventually rose to be a full squadron commander. Gunther idolized his brother, who was not only a hero to him, but a hero to the entire town they grew up in. Gunther resolved to join the army when he was old enough and join his brother in the skies. Now, during the Battle of Britain, his brother was shot down, and while the official story was that he probably died instantly and didn't suffer, Gunther later learned that due to the design of the plane, his brother most likely died screaming, burning in the flames for almost half a minute. Gunther vowed he would not die like that, and certainly not die for his country. So he joined the military and went into the intelligence corps. He applied himself and got top marks, and he was accepted to go be a spy in the United States. He arrived in Los Angeles under the assumed name of Mark Vanderpoel, and simply disappeared into the country. He went east and settled in Salvation, Texas. Gunther tells Jesse that he loves America and everything about it. Baseball, apple pie, stars and stripes, John Wayne, and fireworks in the 4th of July. Most importantly, he loves the myth of America, that this is a land of good people who will one day be worthy of her. America was a land of second chances, and Gunther was happy to make the most of it. This story really won Jesse over and pushed all the right buttons for him, and they became fast friends. Back over to Quincannon. He is still all riled up over his most recent confrontation with Jesse, and Quincannon, being an incredible racist, did not like the fact that Jesse brought a black girl with him to his office. Quincannon decides to call in his old friends, some real talent, some members of the Ku Klux Klan, and he's gonna call them in for a favor. Issue 45, Southern Cross. Jesse, he's getting to work doing the hard work of being a sheriff. He arrested 5 or so of Quincannon's men, and they spent the night in their cellar/holding cell, and Miss Oatlash is here to bail these men out. Jesse tells her the charges are various: disturbing the peace, property damage, public indecency, assault, possession of an offensive weapon. Miss Oatlash comments that they seem a little beat up too, and Jesse says, resisting arrest. Jesse points to 2 of the men and says, and these 2 had sex in the cells last night, but I guess that's their business. Now, as a recurring bit, the smaller blonde guy named Billy says, right up the damn ass, and the bigger guy explains, hey, I come to this town to get laid, and by God, I wasn't going home till I did. He didn't lock us up, I wouldn't have had to settle for Billy over there. And then Billy replies once again, Up the damn ass, sweet Jesus! Jesse asks Miss Outlash for the check for the bail money. He tells her, "This is the third time in 2 weeks, Miss Outlash. Ain't you getting tired of this yet? Coming all the way to town to bail these pukes out? Taking them back to your runt of a boss all busted up? Can't even work in that stinking factory? And all you gotta do is keep them out of salvation on their days off and we ain't gonna have this problem." Miss Outlash and Jesse exchange a few more words. Before they leave, Outlash stares at Jesse a bit and fantasizes about him. Jesse, clueless to her interest, says, "Are you still here? I thought we were done." Later on, Jesse shows his mom the new big blue pickup truck he bought to replace the one that got exploded. He comments, "The only thing more quintessentially American than one of these would be a goddamn horse." Christina replies back, "You are just like your father, Jesse, living a Western." Back over at Quincannon's meat plant, the employees are not happy, but always getting in trouble with the law now. One of the employees says, "That bastard Custer put 6 of our guys in the infirmary since he started. The only reason you got us to move to this here shithole was because you promised us the run of the town for letting off steam. That means drinking and whoring and doing as we please. Not getting whipped and jailed and ending up having to have sex with Billy." And Billy comments once again, "Up the ass, no less." Quincannon says, "Boys, if you'll just leave things in my capable hands." Now the handlebar mustache employee says, "You ain't jerking me off, are you, Quincannon? Because that's worse than having sex with Billy." Billy once again says, "I swear, up the ass." Quincannon says he'll handle it. Quincannon taps his guards and says he's got some people arriving in town later this afternoon. See to it that they are not delayed. He then removes his clothes and heads into his personal meat shed. Jesse has to solve a little personal squabble between 2 citizens. Walter, the dweeby-looking guy, he just bought some pine boards to repair his fence, and he left them in his backyard. He went away for the weekend, and when he got back, all of his lumber he just bought was gone. And Buck here, his neighbor, all of a sudden has a new roof on his shed. Buck claims pretty confidently that he just sanded and varnished his old roof. That's why it looks new and happens to match Walter's lumber. Buck clearly seems to have stolen that lumber from Walter, though. Jesse asks to see Buck's backyard, maybe check his trash can, see if he's got any old rotted lumber from, say, an old shed roof. Jesse, he checks that trash, and sure enough, there's the old lumber. Walter yelling at Buck says, "You liar, you stole my wood." Jesse tells him that there's 2 ways they can settle things. There's the official way. Jesse will have to fill out a shit ton of paperwork and forms, then they're going to have to go to a judge, and eventually Buck will have to pay Walter for all the lumber, and maybe enough to cover his court costs. Or there's the unofficial way, where Buck pays Walter for the lumber right now, and lets Walter have a free shot in the mouth on him. And then we call it quits, right here and now. Walter seems jazzed about the idea. Buck, looking at Walter, doesn't think Walter will be able to do much of a hit on him, so he says, "Hell, why not?" Walter, looking forward to getting back at this bully, this Buck, he throws a punch, and it accomplishes almost nothing. Buck, he doesn't even move. Buck, feeling like he's pretty much won in this situation, says, "Well, I sure do feel a whole lot better for having took my punishment like a man, yes sir. This is where I become a responsible citizen now." Walter feels bad for not hitting Buck that hard, but no worries. Jesse gives Walter a few pointers and then he clocks Buck right in his face. Jesse then walks away and he tells Walter that he's having a little meeting to talk over the whole Quincannon situation later tonight, 7:30 at Jody's Bar and Grill. Be there, you and Buck. Down at Jody's Bar and Grill at 7:30 that night, Jesse has called for a meeting with the whole town. Jesse explains that he's been able to stop this Quincannon and his men from coming into town and causing much damage for a while now. But the son of a bitch, Quincannon, he's gonna cut up real soon, and when he does, Jesse can't afford no crying or backing down. So he wants all the townfolk to decide right now if they want Jesse to take this to the next level. And he wants them all to decide right now. They live here, it's their homes and their businesses. He wants them to be certain before he takes that next step that this is what they really want from him. Or else he says they may as well elect another yes-man sheriff. Cora, the fat racist woman, points to one of the black men in the room, and it says, "How come you invited them people over there?" Jesse facepalms. The black man says, "Hey, great white whale over there sort of got herself a point. When's the law around here ever gave a damn about the folks in my end of town anyhow?" And Cindy explains that her and Jesse arrested a few of Quincannon's men trespassing on your property last week. We did it twice, in fact. The black man seems a little bit convinced that Jesse is a good guy and he's got good intentions here. Gunther, he gets up and defends Jesse as well. He says, just because Salvation is a tiny town doesn't mean its problems can be ignored as insurmountable. To quit in the face of daunting odds, to disintegrate in our own apathy and petty differences because we can no longer even hope for victory would be a terrible mistake. And if I may be so bold, it would be completely contrary to the spirit of the land in which we live. One of the men in the room asks, "What is he saying?" And Jesse answers, "He's saying you're all Texans, and it's up to you to decide what that's gonna mean here. Is it a bunch of fat, bigoted rednecks giving in to crooks and corporations because they're too big to fight and we kind of like them in charge of us anyhow? Or is it drawing a line in the dust and saying no further?" The townfolk seem kind of silent, and Jesse says, "I'll fight the son of a bitch, you just say yes or no." After the town meeting, Jesse is talking to Gunther and thanks him for speaking up during the meeting. The townspeople have given Jesse their blessing to fight Quincannon on their behalf and to take this to the next level. Later on that night, Jesse goes back to the sheriff's office. He's been drinking a little bit. He's remembering his past and his relationship with Tulip, and he gets a little drunk. Cindy arrives later on, and she sees Jesse is a little wasted. The two of them get kind of close for a moment, and Jesse and her, they almost kiss. Then all of a sudden, both of them hear a noise, something outside. They run outside and see a burning cross outside their sheriff's office. Jesse walks outside and he pisses on that burning cross, putting out the flames. So the KKK have left a warning message for him. Jesse walks back over to Cindy and tells her, "I think we got Klan trouble." Inside a parked car nearby, watching this all go down, we see Odin Quincannon and some of his KKK buddies in their hoods. The Klan guys tell Odin, "We'll kill him." Issue 46, White Mischief. Over at Quincannon's meat plant, Miss Oatlash wants to have a meeting with Quincannon, but Quincannon is in his private meat shed. The guards tell her that she's not allowed in there, but she just barges into the meat shed anyway, and as she walks through the various displays of meat and things, she sees what Quincannon is up to in there, and she gets grossed out, and she runs out of the meat shed and she vomits outside. Quincannon, after he finishes up whatever he was doing in there, he comes outside, and Miss Oatlash is warning him that if he involves the Klan in the murder of a town sheriff, however dubious his position, there is nothing I can do to protect you. I'm asking you for the last time to give this up. Quincannon, he's not going to. Miss Oatlash says, "In that case, you leave me no choice. I'm officially tendering my resignation as your lawyer." And Quincannon says, "Yeah, sure, that'll be the day. Where the hell are you gonna find another opportunity like this, Miss Oatlash? Where are you gonna find someone that'll hire a woman to practice corporate law at a level this high? Someone with the kind of money that can buy a senator. someone willing to indulge your goddamn heathen Nazi perversions with a workforce dumb enough to volunteer for them. Where are you gonna find another boss like Odin? Custer dies tonight, so you better just get used to it. And you be ready with that goddamn legal magic of yours in case there's any slip-ups, and leave the rest to me. Over at the sheriff's office, Cindy has her new gun that she ordered, and it's arrived, and she's admiring it and says this is pretty cool. Jesse and her are preparing for their war with the Klan. Cindy, she called the guy she knows in the Houston Police Department, said that he would fax them whatever they had on the Klan. Now that fax starts coming in. On it is a cartoon drawing of a KKK member with the words, "Bone Tree, Midnight, a friend." Jesse asks, "What's a bone tree?" And Cindy explains that it's a dried up oak tree that stands apart from the other pines on the way out of town. It didn't always look like it does now, but back in the 50s it was 5 times as high, and it had these great long branches and leaves all over it. It even had lynch ropes hanging from it. And one night in 1959, the Klan strung up some black boys, and lightning struck the tree and burned it down. After that, the tree sort of entered Klan mythology as proof God hated black people. Jesse says, "What I know of the Lord, I guess it wouldn't surprise me." Jesse comments, This is shitty, Cindy." And Cindy replies, "It's the South." Jesse and Cindy go down to Jody's Bar and Grill and have themselves a last meal before they head out to confront the Klan at this bone tree at midnight. Now we see at the bone tree, we see the Klan all meeting there. 2 of the Klan members are talking about Odin. One Klan guy says to the other, "I mean, I like Odin and everything, but you ever notice how all he talks about is hating black people?" The other Klan guy says, "I mean, isn't that the point of us?" And the first Klan guy says, "I know, but it's like all the time with him. I swear, he's just doing it to impress us, but like all the time? All I'm saying is, at least the rest of us talk about other things, you know? I mean, just the other day, me and Luke had a really good conversation about tractor pulls." Odin arrives and he says, "Hey fellas, boy, I sure do hate black people." Just then, the leader of the Klan says, "Enough of this horse shit." He wants to get stuff started, so he starts speaking. He says, "We Knights of the White Dawn are gathered here in our place of power to discuss the killing of this sheriff that's been causing Brother Odin all this trouble. Gut the son of a bitch like a goddamn catfish and make that bitch of his lap up the mess. Now, Odin tells us this fella ain't even been properly appointed, so we kill him and the feds or the rangers look into it. They gonna find so much shit, we gonna be long gone by the time they finish." Alright, any questions? Just then, Jesse interrupts and says, "I got one. You ladies make them dresses yourself or you buy them from Crackers R Us." Cindy points her new fancy gun with a laser-sighted pointer at the head of the main Klan guy there. Jesse tells the rest of them, "You all take a real good look at that little dot right there. Anyone else wants to grow one just like it? All you gotta do is try talking when I'm talking." Jesse then looks at Odin and tells him, "Odin, the following is for your benefit. Watch and learn." Jesse then tells them all, "I think we'll have them dumb-looking masks off now." Cindy shoots one of the KKK members just above his head through the pointy part of the hood he's wearing. Jesse repeats himself, "Hood's off, boys. Now." Jesse, looking at these bunch of guys, says, "Why is it the greatest champions of the white race always turn out to be the worst examples of it? You! I mean, where's your chin even?" I swear, anyhow, I could have you trash shot down here and now, save us all a lot of trouble, or hell, you know what I could do? I could tell you to get the hell out of here and go and be better people, and you would. One of the KKK members says, "Yeah, right. Jesse tells him, using his word power, "Shit yourself." And we see that guy just took a dump in his pants. Jesse, he threatens to kick all their asses. Now the head Klansman calls over a man named Gary to fight Jesse. He says, "Kick Gary's ass, Sheriff, then talk some more shit if your mouth's still where it used to be." Gary, the buff Klansman, starts talking to Jesse about how buff he is and how much he works out and how much steroids he's done, etc. He says, "I built myself some thighs of iron, arms of steel, pecs of rock." Jesse jumps in and says, "and balls of mush." Jesse squeezes Gary's balls so hard he starts bleeding. Jesse says to them all, "I could kill 1,000 of you assholes, or order you to go to hell, and 1,000 more grow from the same old shit. So I'm gonna do like you do, and I'm gonna make you fear my weapon. Everybody ready? Now fear this." He squeezes this Gary harder. "I know you scum regard this place as part of the history of your effed up little cracker convention, but be advised that so long as it falls within the borders of the town of Salvation, that is no longer the case. This town is off limits to sheet-wearing motherfuckers like you. I had my way. Every hate-mongering piece of shit on the planet thinks he's God's chosen just because of his color would be strongly encouraged to get the F off of it. Man judges another by his skin ain't worthy to be called one. Now you gather up your garbage, including brains of shit here, and you go on home to your fat old clan sows, and next time you're planning something stupid, you pray to effing Jesus someone like me don't take an interest. We are out there." Message ends. Jesse lets this Gary go. Jesse grabs the head Klansman by the ear and drags him to his car, saying, "We have some more to discuss." The other Klansmen abandon their mission and go home. Jesse has won here. Odin can't believe his fellow Klansman brothers have failed him. He says, "Come on, guys, we ain't letting him away with that, right? Let's kick his ass. Fellas? Fellas? Fellas?" Cindy and Jesse drive the Klansmen to John's Hollow, the black part of town, and they toss the Klansmen out of the car, outfit and all, and Jesse and Cindy drive off. As various black people in town start surrounding the Klansman realizes he is really not in a place he wants to be right now. Back over to Quincannon. His bodyguards ask him, "What are you gonna do now?" And Quincannon answers, "Throw a barbecue. I'm gonna burn that town clear to the ground." Issue 47, Jesse, get your gun. Odin Quincannon had the whole main street of the town of Salvation wired with explosives by an ex-Navy SEAL. Unlike the last guy Quincannon hired and tried to kill Jesse with by blowing up his car, this guy knows what he's doing. He gives Quincannon a transmitter and explains, "Transmitter, press the top button once and the first charge goes up. That one is linked up to the sheriff's office like you said. Each successive push of that button will set off another one, up to a total of 23. And if you're in a hurry, the second button will explode the whole town at once." The ex-Navy SEAL guy says, "Alright, that'll be $250,000. Quincannon replies, "Worth every goddamn cent." Jesse and Gunther are discussing matters. Ever since the last confrontation Jesse had with Quincannon, where he drove off the clan, the town of Salvation has been pretty quiet, pretty peaceful. Most of Quincannon's workers in the meat plant went up back to Houston, and Quincannon himself has backed off. But Gunther suspects that he isn't finished with them yet, and Jesse agrees. Cindy, she drives by and says hello to Jesse. Jesse asks her if everything in the town is all quiet. She replies, "You know it. Way things are around here. The two of us will have to do something ourselves to spice things up. I'm going for some Chinese food. You want some?" Jesse answers her, "That'd be real good. Long as you don't start showing off with them damn chopsticks again, Kay?" Cindy replies, "Then it's a date. See you in the office in an hour or two." Jesse pauses, and Gunther and Christina are looking at him, and he says, "What? God damn it, we're just friends, okay?" Jesse's mom says, "You're a fool. You know she likes you more than just friends, and you know it." They ask him, "What's stopping you, Jesse?" Jesse doesn't answer, but clearly he's still in love with Tulip. Over at Quincanon's meat plant, Miss Oatlash and Odin are talking. Oatlash tells Odin that the productivity at the plant has dropped down to almost nothing. Another dozen men left this afternoon. Odin is not concerned. Once he kills Jesse, they'll all come back. Odin has a plan to destroy the town of Salvation in front of Jesse's eyes, and then bring Jesse back here to torture his ass to death over a couple of months. Long enough for Jesse to see all the boys coming back to town and the plant starting up again, and all the townspeople to succumb back over to Odin. Odin, he orders his bodyguards to capture Cindy in order to get to Jesse. So we see Odin's plan being put into action. Cindy, she sees two men working on a broken car. She doesn't know that these two men actually work for Odin. She asks them if they need help, and they draw their gun on her, bringing her over to their trunk and shoving her in it. Jesse, he's contemplating his life and what he is going to do next. He's talking to John Wayne, trying to get some advice. Jesse tells John, "Me and Cindy, we get on real well. We sit up till dawn drinking and talking. I like her and she likes me, and she all but invited me home a couple times, but she's waiting for me to make a move. Shit." John Wayne tells Jesse the only thing stopping Jesse getting with Cindy is that he isn't over Tulip. John Wayne also tells Jesse that he's just treading water in this town. He should just put that Odin in the ground and then go back on his original mission. Jesse realizes that John Wayne is right. But if he is to finish his mission, he can't do it without Tulip. If he's going to finish this thing, he's got to be at his best. And he's at his best when he's with her. John Wayne tells Jesse, "Well then I guess you know what you gotta do, don't ya?" Jesse replies, "I guess so." Jesse gets a phone call right then. It's Quincannon phoning Jesse. As Jesse gets on the phone, all of a sudden, the sheriff's office blows up. Quincannon says to Jesse, "Why, I'm throwing a party, Sheriff, and you don't want the rest of Salvation napalmed along with your black whore and butchered? You better get your ass along to it. Here's what you do." Then he gives Jesse some instructions. We jump over to Cindy. Those two hicks that work for Odin have kidnapped her, and they open the trunk to check on her, and Cindy kicks one of them, and she steals their handgun, and she begins running away. So, Cindy can really fend for herself, and luckily she's not going to be a hostage anymore. Jesse, he goes to the meeting spot that Quincannon told him to meet him at. It's atop some railway tracks built over this stream below, and right now it's raining and thundering, and Jesse is standing there, waiting. At Jody's Bar and Grill, Jesse's mom, Christina, is rounding up firearms and recruiting the townsfolk to help her son, Jesse. Gunther tells her that Jesse said he'd handle it, we're not supposed to follow him. But Christina replies, "He's my son and he's our sheriff. Who's with me?" Quincannon, he arrives at the meeting place to meet Jesse. He has a gun in one hand and a detonator in the other. Odin says, "I knew this day would come. Minute you flung Odin through that window, I knew the time would come that I'd have you where I wanted you, where I could crush you." That's what always happens, see? Fella F's with Odin, Quincannon. Sooner or later, he learns to regret it. Usually around about the time he gets hit so hard, he disappears up his own foreskin, yes sir. Jesse responds to Odin, "Swear to God, little man, half of you hadn't slid out of your mama's ass, the rest of us would have had a lot less trouble. Make your play then. Let's have an end to this." And Odin tells Jesse, "Watch your mouth, you watch your mouth here. I'm calling the shots here, boy. I'm the one with his finger on the goddamn button. And don't you try that effing mojo shit I've seen you do, cause soon as I see them eyes go red, I will by God push it. And don't you forget, Cindy, anything happens to me and I ain't around to give the word, well... Jesse asks him, how do I know you got my deputy exactly? Odin calls up his 2 bodyguards on this walkie-talkie, and he asks them if they have her there. And the 2 bodyguards who are right now hiding from bullets from Cindy, they're lying saying, yes sir, we got her, she just can't come to the phone right now is all. And Odin says, and why not, goddammit? And they say, well, we hit her kinda hard when we got her, see, and she ain't quite woken up yet. And Odin tells them, well, as soon as she does, you call me. All of a sudden we hear some gunfiring in the background, and Odin says, what the hell was that? And the guys on the phone say, oh, that was just thunder, sir. Jesse, hearing all this from the walkie-talkie, tells Odin, you ain't got shit, Quincannon. And Quincannon says, yeah, well, I got this, you bastard. Matter of fact, you take a real good look at your precious little town down there, cause I tell ya, it's gonna be your last. Jesse moves in closer to Odin, and Odin tells him, you keep your distance. Remember, we got your deputy. No, salvation's gonna burn. It's gonna fry like bacon in front of your eyes, and nothing you can do to stop it. And then you and me and the deputy are gonna have ourselves a party you'll never forget. So here it comes. Watch and learn, you fuck. Here's everything you fought to protect, gone in an instant. Here it comes. And as Odin is about to press the button to blow up the entire town, he gets struck by lightning. This pretty much fried the transmitter device, so the town can no longer be blown up. Just at that moment, the rest of the townspeople arrive that Jesse's mom has gathered. Jesse says, man, that was pretty lucky. Odin, he is still alive, though just a little disoriented. Jesse moves closer to Odin, but Odin grabs his gun and fires. Jesse dodges, but Hector, the token town Mexican, he gets shot. And Cora, the racist who's always giving Hector a hard time, she says, no, not my poor little Hector. Baby, Hector, don't you die on me. Jesse runs over to them, and he tells Gunther, hold this jacket here, keep pressure on it. Christina says they gotta get him to a hospital. Cora, talking to Hector, says, oh Hector, I'm sorry I called you a dumb beaner. Jesse sees that Quincannon made his way to his car and drove off while Jesse was distracted here. So Jesse says that he's gotta go after him. The asshole might still have Cindy. I'm gonna have to go get him. Jesse's mom says, alone? And Jesse replies, yeah, alone. I told you folks to stay out of this and I meant it. God damn it, now y'all gotta get this boy out of here and leave that bastard Quincannon to me. And by God, I will finish this once and for all. Jesse's dog Skeeter barks. Jesse tells the dog, alright, you can come with me if you want. Jesse drives over to Quincannon Meats and starts looking for Odin. All of a sudden, Jesse gets surprised with a whip wrapped around his neck, choking him, and it pulls him to the ground. He then gets smacked in the head with a baseball bat. And it is revealed that Miss Oatlash is the one that got the jump on Jesse. And she is dressed in her dominatrix Nazi outfit. She says, now my darling, my Superman, you are my Aryan dream, Jesse Custer, my ultimate physical ideal. Our joining will be a triumph of the National Socialist purity. You are almost perfect, darling. Almost. Issue 48, Goodnight and God Bless. This is the final issue in the Salvation arc, although there are 2 more issues in this volume still. Jesse wakes up, and he is tied down in a bed. He appears to be in some sort of Nazi fangirl bedroom of Miss Oatlash's. Miss Oatlash has dressed Jesse in a Nazi uniform, and she is changing her outfit in the next room. While Jesse is waiting for her, Skeeter, Jesse's dog, sneaks in through the window and chews off one of the ropes tying one of Jesse's hands to the bed. Miss Outlash opens the door and Jesse tells the dog to hide. My god, what is this, a super dog? Jesse found this dog wandering the street and the dog basically saved his life right now. Miss Outlash walks in a very sexual outfit. She calls Jesse her Fuhrer of love. She tells Jesse, "Since the moment I saw you, I wanted you. This will be the love of gods, darling. Your entry will be like lightning. You will invade me, occupy me. And just when I can take no more, you will open up a second front. This will be Blitzkrieg." She then salutes a picture of Hitler she has hanging on the wall. She then jumps on Jesse and tells him to have sex with her, hard, and call her Eva. Jesse managed to get out of his restraints and attack Miss Outlash, and he has now tied her up. And she says, still not giving up her fantasy, "I like it like this. You can't escape this, Jesse Custer. This is your destiny, your divine right." Jesse then goes to leave, but before he does, he passes by Miss Outlash's collection of Nazi books. Jesse says to himself, "I owe you, Skeeter. All I gotta do now is get out of here before anyone sees me wearing this." But as he heads outside, Cindy is there. Cindy is safe outside. She killed one of Odin's men that he sent to kidnap her, and she arrested the other. Cindy is a little confused by Jesse's outfit. Jesse tells her it's a long story. Jesse says, well, I guess that just leaves Quincannon to deal with. They see a trail of blood leading into Quincannon's meat shed. One of Quincannon's bodyguards says, "No, don't go in there. He's got something in there. He made us stand guard while he went in. He wouldn't let no one see it, but I heard noises, terrible noises. I swear to God, there's something awful in there." Jesse tells Cindy to wait out here, and he heads inside the meat shed. Jesse, he starts walking around, looking at all the various meat. He hears Odin talking. "Smear the cheese. Smear the cheese. Pluck the hairs. Pluck the hairs. See the name. See the name." We see Odin Quincannon has built some sort of messed up giant female form made up from the carcasses of dead cows, pigs, and chickens, and he appears to be having sex with it. This is his big secret he's been hiding from everybody. Jesse says, "I seen some messed up things in my time, but that about takes the cookie." Odin, he's on his last bit of life, just crawling around, a pathetic mess, and Jesse tells him, "If this ain't a mercy killing, I'd sure like to know what is." Jesse then stomps on Odin's back, cracking it and killing him. Later on, Jesse and Cindy, they have gathered all the napalm that was planted all over the town, and they use it to blow up the meat factory, and it burns to the ground as they watch on. Jesse says, "Well, Deputy Daggett, I guess our job is done. I just don't know if we did it as legal as I promised you we would." And Cindy says, "I think we were close enough, Sheriff Custer." We see the flames engulfing the meat factory whole. Jesse returns to Gunther's house to visit him late at night, close to 4 a.m. actually. Jesse explains that he came across some books about the Nazis in the boudoir of Miss Outlash's. Jesse took some of those books, hoping to find some mention of Werner Hahn, Gunther's hero brother he mentioned. Jesse did, and he also found mention of Werner's younger brother, Gunther, who had joined the Nazis like his brother had, but he had been shot down and killed. This left Jesse naturally curious as to who this elderly German gentleman in Salvation really was, because he was clearly not who he claimed to be. Jesse, using the word power, forces Gunther to tell him the truth about his story. Gunther admits that his name was actually Siegfried Wechstel, a former member of the vicious Nazi police battalions. He and his men followed armed Nazi occupiers, rounding up and enslaving or shooting civilians in various towns they took over. He worked throughout Eastern Europe and even ended up working at concentration camps. Gunther says he had to do it. They gave him orders. He had to follow them. The horrors of his experience in the war preyed on him. So in 1946, he took the name of a young dead flyer and made his way to America in the hopes that he might one day find redemption. Gunther admits he did some terrible things, but he hopes that Jesse would be willing to give him that redemption. Gunther asks Jesse, "Can you reach out a hand to a friend?" But Jesse refused. Jesse replies, "There's some things can't ever be put right, and you know it." He tosses Gunther a hangman's noose and tells him to go to hell. Gunther then hanged himself in his home. Jesse, preparing to depart the town of Salvation, returns to his burned down sheriff's office, sees if he can find anything salvageable in the remains. All of his worldly possessions were in there. Jesse doesn't have much luck finding anything though. Lori Bobs walks over to Jesse and tells him that a lot of people will miss you when you're gone. Jesse returns to Jody's diner to say goodbye to his mom. We see Hector has survived his gunshot wound, and Cora is putting a sombrero on him. Some people never change. Jesse and his mom Christina talk. Christina can't believe that Gunther hung himself. No, nothing. She doesn't understand it. Just when you think you get to know someone, she says. Christina asks Jesse, "What are you gonna do now?" And Jesse says, "I'm gonna go find out some things I need to know, and then I'm gonna finish this job I gotta do. And then I'm gonna bring my darling home to meet my mom." The two of them hug. Christina says, "Well, it's a cold, hard world out there, Jesse. You take care of it. You hear me?" Christina then gives Jesse something. She tells him, "I kept this with me always. It was with me when I went into the swamp and through the asylum, although by then I had no idea why. And when I came here, I put it in a drawer and forgot about it. But then you arrived. Your father, he gave me this for you the night before he died. Just in case, he told me. For when you are a man." Christina hands over this thing to Jesse, and Jesse, looking at it, says, "This here's the Medal of Honor." The Medal of Honor is the highest and most prestigious personal military decoration that can be awarded to recognize a service member who has distinguished themselves by acts of valor. Jesse has accepted this Medal of Honor and has said bye to his mom, and now he's just waiting. Cindy comes to visit Jesse, the last person he needs to say goodbye to before he leaves. The two of them get to talking, and Jesse tells her, "Look, if I caused you to think something was going to happen here, I know we got kind of close." And Cindy says, "Oh, Jesse, if flirting's a crime, then you better deputize your mom and have her lock us both up. I knew your problem right after that night in your office. Next morning, I brought it up and you changed the subject just as quick as you could." Jesse asks her my problem, and Cindy says, "You're in love with somebody else, Jesse." Jesse's surprised she could tell. Jesse tells her that he's got something for her, and something he wanted to say to her, and she asks, "What might that be?" Jesse tells her that you're as pretty as the stars at evening. He holds her cheek and kisses her, and when he pulls back, he has placed the sheriff's badge on Cindy's left shoulder. Issue 49, First Contact. Jesse has finished what he had to do in the town of Salvation, and now he is ready to continue on his mission. First, though, he has to go on his drug trip to get his answers on Genesis. Jesse, standing on a dock, looking into the lake, takes the peyote drugs he bought off the Navajo man last volume, and he prepares to get his answers. Jesse says, "Here we go, I guess. Just hope it ain't like that goddamn Doors movie." And he takes the drugs. Jesse starts tripping. Blood appears to be coming from his neck. He imagines Cassidy as a blood-sucking leech on him. Jesse then passes out, and he's dreaming. Jesse imagines his childhood friend, Billy Bob. And Jesse's horrible family has poked out Billy Bob's only remaining eye, and he now has an eye patch covering that eye. TC takes Billy Bob and has a plan for that eye socket of his. Jesse then imagines a trashy tulip with Jody. and Jesse goes to punch Jody, and Jody punches Jesse, and Jesse goes flying into the air. Jesse, he's now falling out of the sky in his dream, and all of a sudden, he starts remembering the events after he fell from the airplane that day in Arizona. That blind spot, that hole in his memory. When Jesse fell out of that plane, God saved him from death. God tells Jesse that he loves him, and that is why he saved Jesse's life. And he forgives Jesse for not following his past warnings to leave him alone. God tells Jesse, "But your long journey, that is at last at an end. You've found your Lord, and I stand before you, wondrous, loving, gracious, full of light. You need seek no longer. Go now and live in peace." And Jesse replies, "The fuck I will." Jesse says, "There's questions you gotta answer. Not just why creation's full of pain and misery, or why you'd make a world this cold. No, you tell me why you're running from me, boy. Tell me what gives you the right to desert your place in heaven, to run out on folks you mean so much to. And tell me why I shouldn't send your ass right back there." God, a little bit upset, says, "The creation cannot make demands of its creator." Jesse says, "Then the creator shouldn't piss on his creation." God tells Jesse, Jesse, see sense. Look upon the carnage this quest of yours has wrought. Think about the pain. And more than that, you simply cannot do this. You cannot stand before the Lord your God and then defy my will." Jesse asks, "So how come you ain't smiting me for my sacrilege exactly?" And God continues, "Oh, willful man, how often must you hear it said, 'Because I am a loving God, think about the chances I have given you. Remember how I took away the power you hold and returned it when you were at the mercy of your enemies?" And Jesse says, "Oh, I remember that all right, and I remember how Tulip got shot and how you brought her back just to send me a warning. Jesus, what the hell kind of loving God could treat a life so cheap? See, I'm wondering why it took you so long to find the balls to face me instead of using her and Cassidy. You really such hot shit? Or it could be you ain't as strong away from home as you'd like for me to think. This power I got, did you return it that time? Or did it maybe just come on back by itself?" Jesse is determined to see God held accountable for his desertion and for the horrible things he has done. Jesse, he attempts to use his word power on God. And that really pissed God off. So God grabbed Jesse and began strangling him and says, "Enough! You would command your God, O man? You would stain his holy being with such ultimate blasphemy? Repent, O sinner! Fall down before your master! Beg forgiveness! Beg!" Jesse, he then spits in God's face, and God screams, and he then sucks out Jesse's left eyeball, and that is how Jesse lost his eye. And God says to Jesse, "Believe in the loving God, repent your sin before the loving God, tremble at the might of the loving God, accept me as your savior or be damned." God is about to finish and kill Jesse, but all of a sudden the Saint of Killers shows up, and God calms down a bit back to normal and says, "You." God, he was terrified of the one being who could kill him, the Saint of Killers, so God ran. The Saint, looking at Jesse, offers to kill him to save Jesse's sanity. The Saint explains, "Not many survive the touch of God, boy. Saints mostly, maybe a prophet or two. If you did live, you'd go crazy. Ain't no way you'd remember any of this." Jesse says, "I ain't dying and I ain't going crazy, and I by God will remember one way or the other. And I don't need a quick death from you, cause you and me, we're gonna take that bastard down." The Saint replies, "I ain't helping you with nothing, preacher. So long." The Saint walks away. So now Jesse remembers that hole in his memory and everything that went down. But now he has to continue the rest of his crazy drug trip. Jesse's mind travels back to when he was a little kid. and TC and Jody came to their home to take Christina back to Angelville. But this time in Jesse's dream, his dad and mom killed Jody and TC right then and there. But then Mary Lou Angel comes to collect Jesse and Christina, and she turns into this hideous serpent-like creature, and she's going to devour them. But then, saving the day is a gigantic John Wayne that stomps and kills Mary Lou Angel. And Jesse's dad tells gigantic John Wayne, "Much obliged, sir." And John Wayne replies, "Hell, it was a pleasure. Got a message for the little pilgrim there. Friend of his is kind of scared for him and wanted me to pass it along." And then Skeeter the dog starts licking Jesse's face in the real world. And Jesse, he wakes up from this drug-induced dream. Jesse, he fell off the dock at some point during his drug trip, and he managed to drift ashore to the beach. Jesse, armed with this new knowledge, Jesse feels renewed and ready to continue his mission. He says into the sunset, talking to God, "I'm coming for you, you son of a bitch, and hell is riding with me." Issue 50, The Land of Bad Things, the last issue in this volume. There's one last thing Jesse feels he must do before he continues on his mission, and it's an excuse for Garth Ennis to tell another Vietnam War story. So we see Vietnam War vet and friend to John Custer, Billy Baker, aka Spaceman, once again back in the story. He's looking at a monument with the names of various soldiers that died in Vietnam. And he has his hands on the name of his friend Vincent R. Goring, aka Ghani, whom we met previously in the Vietnam issue in Volume 3. Jesse, he meets Billy, and they get to talking. Jesse asks Billy to meet him here. He wants to find out about his dad winning the Congressional Medal of Honor. And Billy says, well, they probably got the citation in the congressional records, you could read it there. Jesse replies, they probably do, but it's the highest award this country can give you, and I guess I'd like to know how he got it from someone that was actually there. Billy replies, oh, I bet you do. But you don't know what you're asking. You don't know how that thing you got in your hand almost killed us both. And the shit that goes along with it, I don't think I'm too proud of some of that. Hell, you swear you'll do anything for some dude, and all you expect is to have to save his ass, maybe take a bayonet in the chest for him, something easy like that. The last goddamn thing you think it means is telling his boy the truth 30 years later. The worst part of it is, we was both nearly out of that shithole. He begins telling Jesse the story. So we flash back to the Vietnam War days. John Custer, Jesse's dad, and Billy Baker, Texas and the Spaceman, they are making their way through the jungle. There are explosions around them. Billy is injured. He appears to have gotten shot in the leg, and John is carrying Billy and pushing him forward, and they make their way to their helicopter evac that is supposed to be waiting for them, but they see it is burning and it got taken down, and all the other transport helicopters are already flying away. John, he patches up Billy's leg. The bullet went right through, although John is worried it might be infected. John is reading a map. Their transport is gone and they are thought to be dead, and no one is coming for them. John says they have to walk the rest of their way home, and Billy replies, shit man, it's a long walk and I got this messed up leg. And John says, well, the alternative is to surrender, and that means letting these sons of bitches take us back up north to Uncle Ho to give blowjobs for the rest of our lives. That ain't for us. We're going home. So they begin walking. John is disillusioned with the war. He says, we ain't here to win no war. We ain't here to beat no one. What we do is we build a bunch of goddamn fire bases out in the bush, and the Hueys fly us in and out, and once we get a couple of confirmed kills, we go back and lie on our asses till it's time to do it all again. That ain't how you win. You're supposed to take and hold territory and then take some more. Ugh. And a police action? My ass, nobody's telling me we're protecting shit out here. Half the villages we walk into, we burn to the damn ground. They walk some more. And Billy says he ain't gonna make it. He says, my legs are messed up. I can't walk no more. You gotta leave me, Texas. You're gonna get yourself killed out here for nothing. I'm dead anyways. And John says, bullshit. He ain't leaving Billy. And then Billy points his gun to his head. He's contemplating suicide. And John tries to talk him out of it. He points his gun at Billy. And Billy tells him, are you stupid? You gonna kill me to stop me from shooting myself? And John tells him, I ain't hauling you halfway across hell's creation just so you can pussy out on me now. You can't just throw it all away like this. This is messed up. They continue having a very heated conversation, yelling at each other, swearing at each other with various expletives and racial slurs. It gets very heated indeed. They eventually calm down, and John tells Billy, look, you want to? Go on and pull that trigger. Because if things are really as shitty as this, I'm going to be right behind you. Billy gets up and extends his hand to John, and they decide to keep going. Jesse and Billy stumble upon a Vietnamese sneak attack in the middle of a minefield outside of a US military base. John and Billy need to somehow signal the American base to warn them. The only problem is, the only way they know to signal the base is to fire shots in the air. And this area in the bush is going to be crawling with Vietnamese soldiers and snipers. No, John says we're going to have to go to them, cross the open ground after dark. And Billy replies, but his leg, it'll give out at any moment. John decides that he's going to have to carry Billy on his back. And when it's dark, he starts running across the minefield with Billy hanging on. The Americans at the base, they're just watching, waiting. John and Billy start running across that minefield, and the Americans vaguely see movement in the field. So they begin opening fire thinking it's the Vietnamese. John, with Billy on his back, is running through that minefield toward the American camp. The Vietnamese start firing at the Americans are firing back at the Vietnamese, and John and Billy are yelling, not us, hold your fire. Jesus Christ, we're Americans. John and Billy both get shot. The Americans that are firing realize that John and Billy are Americans, so they go out and retrieve them. Luckily, they are still alive. Billy explains to Jesse that tank captain that retrieved us, he was the one that wrote up John's citation after he talked to me later on. John, he foiled a Vietnamese sneak attack, helped a wounded comrade across 100 clicks of enemy territory, and brought him in under fire. That was more than enough for the Medal of Honor. Billy says that him and John, they were pumped full of morphine, and John told him, this ain't our time to die. And then Billy passed out from the drugs, and he never saw John again. They both spent a long time in the hospital, and then they finished their tours and easy postings, and John got sent home, and then later Billy. And Billy says, but you know something? He saw it. Them 6 little words, this ain't our time to die. He saw through to the clear, pure truth that should have mattered to me more than anything. All this time I've been mad about this shit that went down over there, wondering why all them dudes got wasted, and I made it cursing the government for screwing us like that, and it's only now I can see like he did. We made it. We didn't end up on no wall. Jesse, holding that medal, feels like he doesn't deserve to have it. Jesse thinks his dad would want him to do what was right with it, so Jesse says, how about we leave it here with all these other boys? Jesse, he thanks Billy for taking the time to talk to him, and he comments, you know, it helps to know the kind of man you gotta measure up to. Gives you hope. Jesse asks Billy, you gonna stay for a while? And Billy replies, yeah, I kinda like it here. I like how they got the grunts' names up, all of them, instead of just the dates or the war or some shit. And I like how it's quiet here. And I especially like how they got them 3 dudes in the trees over there, like they coming out of the boonies after some patrol, and they only just seeing all this, and they like, shit, someone remembered. Billy, he's looking at all the names on the wall. We see John Custer's Medal of Honor left on the ground by the wall. And Billy says, so tell me something. How come you shitheads never write? And that is how the volume ends. Alright, so that was Salvation. I have lots of thoughts on this volume. I want to start out with some criticisms first. One is the whole amnesia part of it. I always find amnesia lazy in stories, and we had two characters with amnesia in this volume. We had Christina, Jesse's mom, having amnesia, forgetting her whole life. We had Jesse having amnesia, forgetting his confrontation with God and how he survived that plane crash. Mind you, I think they did have logical explanations for why these characters didn't remember. Christina got shot in the head and she had all this trauma. I understand why she would forget stuff. And Jesse, he had this confrontation with God. That would mess anyone up. But still, I always find it a little bit lazy with amnesia in stories. It's a way to just get characters to where you need them to be. That doesn't maybe make the most sense sometimes. We did have that whole Vietnam arc, which was a little bit filler, but still, I thought it was well written. But I think the big criticism you can have in this volume is that it was 10 issues, and we didn't really progress the overall story that much. However, despite that, I think that Salvation arc was one of the best stories in Preacher. I thought it was a really compelling standalone tale. Jesse as this sheriff in this small town. It's like a modern day Western. Jesse is like stepping into the John Wayne role. He's this guy new in town. He's got this eye patch. He's taking down the bad guys. And Odin Quincannon is a really compelling bad guy. He's got these weird sexual perversions. He runs this meat plant. He's got all these weird characters in that meat plant, and they're causing havoc on the town. He's got this sexy Nazi female lawyer chick with him. We had the KKK thrown into the mix in this story. All these new cast of characters, the townsfolk that Jesse meets, very compelling. Cindy, very compelling. Jesse being reunited with his mom. So all in all, I thought there was lots of really good stuff in this volume. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I'm curious some of your thoughts on this volume and what you thought of this divergence. But thank you all for watching, and I will be back next week with Volume 8. Only 2 volumes left.